Brandon Sanderson is probably one of the most popular fantasy authors today, and I both love all of his series and I also admire his consistency at constantly putting out amazing books year after year across multiple different series. And it's because I have reread multiple series of his several times that I noticed one thing in particular which I think Sanderson does extremely well. And that's write climaxes. All of Sanderson's climaxes feel extremely tense, dramatic, and emotionally engaging, and they result in some of the most epic and memorable moments in the series. After spending some time thinking about it, I believe I've managed to break down the techniques that Sanderson uses in his climaxes, and there are lessons in them for us as enjoyers of the series, and also any aspiring writers who want to understand how they can effectively create tension, stakes, and provide satisfying conclusions. So what we'll be doing in this video is breaking down each part of what I call the Sanderson formula for plot climaxes. We'll discuss each part and the techniques employed, then walk through live examples from two Sanderson books, Warbreaker, the standalone, and Well of Ascension, the second Mistborn book. Originally, I was also going to talk about Oathbringer from the Stormlight archives, but I think it will make the video take a bit too long, so we'll just focus on the first two books. So without any further ado, let's just get to it. There are 4 parts to the Sanderson formula. Now, just before I share these, I want to be clear that I am on some level simplifying here, as the actual scenes in the books are obviously more complex. They have multiple instances of peaks and troughs with the tension and characters doing various different things, so not each climax perfectly follows the formula. So it might be better to think of these as structural guidelines rather than a rigid template. In any case, the Sanderson climax formula includes the following parts. Firstly, spreading the action across 2 or more different locations simultaneously. Second, having a critical time pressure of some kind. Third, what I call the crisis of faith followed by the ray of hope, which is basically crafting an atmosphere of total hopelessness before establishing a faint glimmer of possibility and hope, representing a critical emotional pivot in each climax. And finally, the 2-step dissolution of tension. Let's now go through each of these in turn. Point 1. Spreading the action. Brandon Sanderson's narratives typically follow multiple characters. During climactic sequences, these characters are often spread across various locations, separated from each other, and each facing their own unique set of challenges and problems that collectively escalate the overall conflict. What Sanderson will do is write each smaller conflict simultaneously, switching quickly between the different perspectives of the characters as their problems become increasingly insurmountable. This narrative technique not only intensifies the sense of urgency, but also immerses the reader in a multifaceted struggle. It effectively creates a feeling of being overwhelmed, as we're bombarded constantly from every direction by the problems weighing down on the characters. And this feeling is suffocating. Have you ever been at work or school and found yourself becoming overwhelmed by the sheer scale and number of problems directed your way? This is the kind of feeling that Sanderson is trying to recreate in the reader. So let's start to run through our 2 examples to see how Sanderson uses this technique. In Warbreaker, we have 3 key locations that the action is split between. We have Lightsong exploring the tunnels beneath the palace with his priest, coming across an imprisoned Blushweaver. He tries to fight the guards to save her, but is quickly overpowered and is struck with the harsh reality of how much he'd overestimated himself. The soldier nearest Lightsong attacked, and Lightsong raised his blade awkwardly, trying to block, doing a horrible job of it. The guard at his feet suddenly threw himself at Lightsong's legs, toppling him to the ground. Then, one of the standing guards thrust his sword into Lightsong's thigh. The leg bled blood as red as that of any mortal. Suddenly, Lightsong knew pain. Pain literally greater than any he'd known in his short life. He screamed. At the same time, Ciri and the God King, suspecting betrayal by their priestly escort, attempt to flee the palace. She screamed for help. "Quiet, you fool," Trelady said. "We're trying to help you." His lies rang hollow in her ears, and she struggled as the soldiers pulled her from the room. She heard fighting down the hallway, and she screamed towards it as the soldiers roughly pulled her away. Meanwhile, and again at the same time, Vasher is being held captive and being tortured by Demph. Demph stood with his back facing Vasher, bloodied knives on the ground around him. Vasher looked up, forcing a smile. "Not as much fun as he thought it would be, is it, Demph?" Demph didn't turn. Over in the Well of Ascension, we have two locations. The first is the capital city of Luthadel, which comes under attack by an army of Colossus. Even far away, the tower letting him see over a section of the city to where Tingate lay, the Zed could see the Colossus running straight through hailstorms of arrows. Some of the smaller ones appeared to fall dead or wounded, but most just continued to charge. Men murmured on the tower near him. "We aren't ready for this," Zed thought. "Even with months to plan and anticipate, we aren't ready." The second location is with Vin and Elend, who are leaving the city, then focusing on Vin as she races back. Vin ran. She'd only been on one pewter drag before, with Kelsia 2 years ago. While burning pewter at a steady flare, one could run with incredible speed, like a sprinter in their quickest dash, without ever growing tired. Yet the process did something to her body. Pewter kept her moving, but it also bottled up her natural fatigue. The juxtaposition made her mind fuzz, bringing on a trance-like state of exhausted energy. Her soul wanted so badly to rest, yet her body just kept running and running and running, following the canal towpath towards the south, towards Luthadel. These interconnected threads of action, amplified by the looming deadline, which we'll explore in just a moment, creates a tapestry of crisis. The action in the climax feels like barely controlled chaos, and it being spread across multiple settings and perspectives not only maintains high stakes, but also makes the eventual convergence and resolution of these threads incredibly satisfying and emotionally charged. This takes us to the next point: critical time pressure. So, at each climactic point in the story, as we've just been discussing, where the characters are spread across their multiple locations and struggling against the odds, Sanderson then introduces some kind of time pressure to act as the backdrop to the action, further heightening the stress and tension felt by the characters. In Warbreaker, this critical time pressure is the army of Lifeless marching to eradicate the Idrians. And in the Well of Ascension, this time pressure is Vin racing back to Luthadel to try and reach it before the Colossus army kills everybody in the city. This external pressure compels the characters to make swift, desperate decisions, and it also removes any possibility of them simply just surviving or running away, forcing them further into each conflict. Stress of the combined threads of action, coupled with the mounting time pressure, always then culminates in what I call the crisis of faith, the absolute low point. This is our third component of how Sanderson writes a climax: crisis of faith, ray of hope. Crisis of faith moment represents the apex of tension in Sanderson's climaxes, the moment when characters are pushed to their emotional and existential limits, teetering on the edge of absolute despair, where characters are left absolutely broken and about to lose all hope. It isn't always necessarily felt by every character equally, but almost every other character will similarly be at their lowest point. In Warbreaker, the crisis of faith centers on Lightsong. After witnessing Blushweaver's death and being forced to confront his own mortality and limitations, he succumbs to despair. His frustration and misery is mirrored by the God King. "I am nothing," Lightsong thought. "Why couldn't I save her? Why couldn't I protect her?" He was crying again. Oddly, someone else was too. The man in the cell next to him, the God King. Susebron moaned with frustration, pounding against the bars of his cage. Then another quote. "What good is godhood?" Lightsong whispered. "What?" Larimar finally asked. "What good is it?" Lightsong said. "We aren't gods. Gods don't die like that. A little cut, not even as wide as my palm." Meanwhile, in the Well of Ascension, the crisis is more distributed amongst the characters, but most impactfully from Vin, as she's the only character who stands the slightest chance of saving the city. He reached for the sword on his table as men began to die. He closed his eyes. "You know, Kel," he thought, "I almost started to believe that they were right, that you were watching over us, that you were some sort of god." Doxon gritted his teeth, sending a final curse Kelsia's way, then charged, swinging. The creature caught his weapon in an indifferent hand, ignoring the cut it caused. Then it brought its own weapon down, and blackness followed. And then with Vin, she ducked and dodged, jumping, staying out of their reach, killing as many as she could. But as desperate as her determination, as strong as her newfound resolve to defend, she knew that she couldn't keep fighting. Not like this. She was only one person. She couldn't save Luthadel, not alone. The paired portion of this technique is one of the most important that Sanderson employs. the ray of hope that shines amidst the darkness of despair. At these low points, there is a single moment that provides a brief respite, a small glimpse of hope, of success for the characters, and a relief for the reader, the promise that not all is lost. This narrative pivot is crucial not only for resolving the tension, but for reinforcing the themes of resilience and redemption that are central to Sanderson's storytelling. In Warbreaker, Lightsong's epiphany about his purpose and his act of sacrifice to save the God King symbolizes this shift. Lightsong stepped forward, moving up to the bars of his cage. He saw pain and tears in the God King's face, and somehow understood them. The man did love Ciri. Lightsong had seen the same thing in the Queen's eyes. She had somehow come to care for the man who was to oppress her. "You are my king," Lightsong whispered, "and lord of the gods." The Pankal men forced the God King face down on the stones. One of the priests raised a sword. The God King's arm jutted out, his hand towards Lightsong. "I have seen the void," he thought, "and I came back." And then Lightsong reached through the bars and grasped the God King's hand. A fake priest looked up with alarm. Lightsong met the man's eyes, then smiled broadly, looking down at the God King. "My life to yours," Lightsong said. "My breath become yours." And in the Well of Ascension, this comes when Vin realizes the way to subdue the Colossus. She stood upright, the dark streets suddenly quiet save for the whimpering Scar. The Colossus waited, and she could feel herself in their minds, as if they were an extension of her own body. Same thing she had felt when she'd taken control of Tensoon's body. Cousins indeed. The Lord Ruler had built the Colossus with a weakness, the same weakness as the Khamdra. He had given himself a way to keep them in check, and suddenly she understood how he'd controlled them all those long years. However, the resolution of the crisis is intentionally staggered, creating a two-step process where the immediate danger is addressed, whilst a larger, looming threat remains. This technique effectively maintains suspense and engagement as the resolution of one conflict transitions into the next challenge, driven by the underlying critical time pressure. And so the final point, two-step dissolution. In Warbreaker, the first step resolution is immediately after the God King is healed by Lightsong. He takes control of the palace, saving Ciri, and at the same time, Vasha defeats Demph in a duel. The second step is when Vasha hands the God King his own lifeless army, allowing them to save the Idrians, and finally resolving the tension from the climax. In the Well of Ascension, we see a similar pattern. The first step resolution is after Vin takes control of the Colossus, resolving the attack on the city. The second step comes when she kills Strath Venture and takes control of his army, finally dissipating the remaining tension. In conclusion, I think the way that Brandon Sanderson writes climactic scenes is masterful, and it's a testament to how to write a really emotionally engaging sequence. By dissecting the techniques he employs, we can gain invaluable insights into the art of building tension and delivering satisfying climaxes. Let's quickly recap each of the 4 points that we spoke about. So the first, spreading action across various locations and characters. This creates an overwhelming feeling of being suffocated by the numerous problems being piled upon the characters and maintains a high level of tension. The second is the critical time pressures, which heightens the urgency of the narrative and compels characters to make rapid, impactful decisions, accelerating the plot towards the climax. Third is the crisis of faith, followed by the ray of hope, which I think is the most emotionally resonant of all the techniques we've discussed in this video, where characters are forced to confront their deepest fears and insecurities. It deepens character development and solidifies the emotional investment from the audience. By pushing characters to their limits, Sanderson also effectively sets the stage for profound transformations and revelations. And finally, Sanderson's two-step resolution process ensures that while the immediate threats are addressed, it still maintains the momentum leading up to the final resolution. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I really do think that by studying and integrating these techniques, writers can really enhance their own storytelling. Although that's not to say that I'm suggesting anybody simply copy this, but I think we can definitely take important lessons from it and from the success of these stories. That takes us up to the end of this video and what I wanted to discuss today. So as always, if you've listened this far, thank you very much for listening. I'm always interested to hear what you guys think. I'll always do my best to try and reply to everybody who comments on these videos. And if you liked this video and you want to see more, please do like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.